Tonight for the D2 breakdown, we're talking all about the PSAC, Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference. This is a conference that just a year ago, 4 teams in the NCAA playoff, which is an impressive feat for any level, let alone Division II, where as of late, only 28 teams. So you've got 1/7 of them coming from this conference. Quick math for you. Slippery Rock, they beat Cal PA to advance to the semifinals. They played a great game versus Ferris State. We'll talk about those teams, both of them ad nauseum tonight, Drew, but let's get into this thing, man. PSAC is a really loaded conference. I'm trying to think, in your time at Tech, you guys didn't really play any PSAC opponents. What about at Northwood?
My first ever college game was against Gannon University.
Okay, there you go.
I believe in my 4 years of playing, that was the only PSAC team.
How'd you guys do?
Lost in overtime. Didn't necessarily play that much, so can't take the blame on that one. First playing on defense was a tackle, though, and then they took me right out because Eric Santiago was a dog that year. So
okay, fair. Shout out Eric, man. Let's talk about the top dog in this conference, and that you have to start with no one else than Slippery Rock, man. The Rock, 12-2 a year ago, 5-1 inside of conference play. I said it earlier on. This is the team that gave the Bulldogs probably the best run for their money inside of that playoff run. And you're watching that game, I believe, at Ferris State, and Ramper and some of these guys going on the sideline, these wide receivers, they're airing the ball out. They had a great guy at quarterback we'll talk about a little bit later, Braden Long, who was a Harlan Hill finalist, and they really gave this Ferris team a run for their money. That was the best way to cap off this season, other than a win, of course, for the Rock. The best way to cap off this season and to show their product on the national stage. But how do they rebuild in 2025 after losing some of the top production, right? Winning culture, pedigree with consistent messaging from a long-tenured coaching staff. That's the short answer of that. And Sean Lutz, the man at the head of that, he is going to be a major part of that. Now, transfer portal-wise, they got a lot coming in, a lot going out. There's a lot of transactions there. Top 3 wide receivers from a year ago, Drew, are all gone. That's 2,100 yards and 20 touchdowns combined that are going out the door to the transfer portal.
Yes, that immediately, obviously, when you hear 2,100 yards, you're like, okay, we're going to need to bring in some people that can play now. But we're also going to need the guys that weren't a part of that to be like, hey, you as a true freshman or from a season ago, you're going to have to step your game up as a redshirt freshman or as a true sophomore to that extent.
Yeah, you get to see some of that development from the guys that are internal inside of that program for sure. And like you said, the guys that need to plug and play right away need to be week 1 or even week 0 type of guys. I don't know if they have a week 0 matchup or not, but you bring in all conference wide receivers from D3 Westminster and NAI Missouri Baptist. That helps supplement the receiving core right away, hopefully bring some production to that room. And then, like I said, the Harlan Hill finalist, Braden Long, he's done under center at the Rock. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. He's at Shippensburg actually now. But the running back tandem, that was one of the best in the country, that graduates and leaves the offense with more questions than answers going into 2025 for this Slippery Rock team. But as far as who you need to watch, they get a transfer defensive lineman, Brett Quokka, who was a first-team All-PSAC selection in 2024, not for Slippery Rock, but for Shepherd, the Rams, this fall, though, suiting up for the Rock. He should have 2 more years of eligibility. And then redshirt senior defensive back Michael Henwood, a guy that we've posted about in our channels before. He's back for the Rock after a 2024 season with 72 tackles, 3 interceptions. All in all, full transparency, expect the Rock to regress this year. I think a lot of people on the outside do. That's the job of the guys inside of that locker room, that facility, to prove people like me wrong. It's so hard to take the next step when you lose the amount of production that I just talked about. But if you are counting them out to be a top contender, at least in the west side of the division, you're dead wrong. This is a team that, again, under the tutelage and the guidance of Sean Lutz, will certainly be in the conversation on the west side of the conference. Feels like other teams may be more poised right now than Slippery Rock in terms of the PSAC, but this team will still be an interesting one to follow heading into the fall, Drew.
Yeah, little known, maybe unknown fact about Slippery Rock is that I believe at halftime of the Michigan game, they're always shown their score. Man. So that's pretty cool. I don't know what
Isn't that awesome? That was a tradition that started, it feels like forever ago, and the Michigan people eat that up.
Yeah, I don't know what the connection is, but I knew about Slippery Rock before I even knew what D2 football was. So
seriously?
Yeah, because as a kid, you're like, who is the Slippery Rock team? Because you're going to the Michigan games.
I do
But
believe they played some games in the big house way back when.
it might have been it. Or I think a coach left to go coach at Slippery Rock or
Okay.
something like
Okay.
that. But anyway, to the California, Pennsylvania Falcons, 2024 was a solid year for them. 10-3, included a regular season win over the team that we just talked about, Slippery Rock. But everything comes full circle, and they ended up losing to the Rock in the third round of the playoffs. 10-win season, though, under their belt. That's obviously a consistency for the Falcons. However, though, with success usually leads to departure. And in this case, Bobby Boyd, who's their leading running back from a season ago, I believe he was close to eclipsing 1,000 yards. He's gone. Julian LaVenture, defensive lineman, gone. Eric Willis, gone, wide receiver, and defensive back Rashawn Murray. So kind of, Kobe,
Gone.
yeah, the reason I kind of looked at those four is you look at defensive line, you look at running back, you look at receiver, you look at defensive back. Like, it's kind of attacked on all aspects of this team that they're losing someone there. So that's obviously going to be interesting. But they bring in 9 guys in the portal, so that's very solid, right? You know, you lose 15, but like we talk about with most teams, you're kind of expecting, you know, the people you recruited there and out of high school to step up for a reason. That's right. Part of the things that D2 is. But as far as guys to go, you know, where their question marks are at, I think obviously when you lose a dynamic playmaker in the backfield, that's a huge part. So who can replace Boyd? And then defensively are able to reload. And quite honestly, I think defensively they'll be pretty good. I was looking at a couple of their guys coming back. Let's talk about Khalil Taylor, defensive back, as well as Keith Charney and Naquan Crowder, all guys that are potential breakout candidates from a season ago, and expect them to not only, you know, grow off their season, but to obviously lead the defense as well.
Yeah, Crowder's been a guy on my radar for sure. I've heard that name thrown around. And Drew, not sure if you're aware, but these guys play in one of the cooler rivalry matchups in D2 football. They've got a series with IUP. They play for what's called the Coal Bowl. Coal isn't like COAL there, but it is. It's a pretty awesome deal. The trophy is a neat one, and that's a game that's been pretty competitive as of late. These guys, of course, recently being the ones to retain that trophy. That's one of the cooler ones in the PSAC, and I think in Division II football as a whole. But when you talk PSAC football, you would be remiss if you did not talk about Kutztown and the Bears. This is a squad that has been at the forefront of this conference at the conference and national stage, and a top-tier PSAC team has been playing some of its best ball as of late. Suffocating defense, that's their calling card. They're able to win on the road, I think, is another big piece of this Kutztown team, and that's gone into the playoffs. That's gone into the PSAC championship. These are the things that we've seen throughout the course of the regular and postseason from this squad. You talk about the portal. They're bringing in 2 starting defensive backs, a starting wide receiver, all from Shippensburg. So stealing some of those PSAC foes, bringing them over, converting them to the dark side. In terms of who to watch for this team, got to start under center. Judd Novak, the quarterback for the Bears, heading into this one. He finished 24 with just under 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns. He's going to be a redshirt junior in the fall. He's got 2 more years to play. Hopefully both of them are with the Bears. I'm sure they're thinking the same thing. And to me, 2 full years as a starter under his belt. His first year, very similar stat line to year number 2. Is this the year where he makes that jump, where he takes the next step in his progression with maybe a little bit of a supporting cast around him? And you talk about the way that he plays. He's gotten a lot more efficient in the passing game. His percentages, his touchdown to interception ratio, all those things are trending in the right direction. That more than just dropping back, though. This is not a guy you just put under center. It's a 3-step or a 5-step, and he makes a read. They love to roll him out. They throw on the run. They also do a little bit of that speed option, though, with him. He's very athletic out of the backfield. Seen him make some big chunk plays there with his feet. Running backs, Jaden Stewart, Stephen Burkhart, those 2 are going to be his best friends, right? Combined for 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns. Both of them, again, redshirt juniors in the fall. If you can keep this offensive core nucleus together, we're talking about something very dangerous inside of the PSAC for the next couple of years. Stewart's 5'9", 200 pounds, and Burkhart 5'11", 210 in that same range. 2 New Jersey guys making up the backfield here for Kutztown. They don't get their running backs involved much in the passing game, which I would like to see change a little bit in 2025 after losing some talent at the wide receiver position, but we'll see if that happens. All in all, though, this should be a team to contend for a PSAC title. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Bears need to take care of business in the regular season. They should have their goals set, though, on hosting another NCAA playoff game, Drew. I think the ceiling is very high. They start the year off at home versus a top 10 or a top NE10 opponent, not a top 10's opponent, in Assumption, and then should be able to get things rolling from there. But if you can't tell, very high on the Bears. Of course, Craig Reynolds, who we had on the pod very recently, Kutztown alum. KU, baby.
Absolutely. Craig Reynolds, friend of the program.
Friend of the program. I like the sound of that.
So we'll take that where we can get it. As far as Kutztown is concerned, I love their logo too. If we're just not talking, I think it's a cool, bear. I feel like a lot of teams don't necessarily go all out.
There's a lot of bears. Yeah, there's a lot of bears, but how many cool bears are there?
Yeah.
I like that, dude. Tell me about, of course, had the quarterback, had Sean on the show earlier in the program, but tell me about this Stroudsburg squad, excuse me.
Warriors. Yep. We got the East Stroudsburg Warriors, 2024, 10-2 overall, 6-1 in PSAC play. They did earn a playoff berth a season ago. They're one of those 4 teams that we talked about, Kobe. But they were eliminated by one of those other 3 teams of the 4 teams we're talking about in California, PA, which obviously, you love to see the conference do good. But when one member of the conference takes out another member of the conference, it's makes that next season match even stronger, even, hungrier for the team, such as the Warriors. As far as their departures are concerned, to be completely honest with you, Tyreek Lewis and Tahir Mills, both of them were close to eclipsing 1,000 yards rushing a season ago.
Yep.
Both gone, one in the portal, one in graduation. They lose Raymond Simmons, the 4th, to graduation. They're stud linebacker, as well as losing Justin Cook, a receiver, and Xavier Gray, a defensive back, to the portal. This is the alarming thing, and maybe it is on Athlinks as we get all of our information from there. But no portal additions. Not saying it's necessarily alarming because, teams might not do the portal as much as others. But obviously in 2025 college football, it's kind of just okay.
Surprising, right? It's very much not the norm. And actually, Sean talked about that in the interview. He talked about coaches kind of, maybe not unwillingness, but the unusual nature for them to go into the portal. He had mentioned very outright that this was not something unusual for this squad. They don't really rely on the portal for a lot of those additions. And typically, that's all, well and good for a team like this that continually can be competitive. But when you lose these guys, you got to find some other playmakers. That's going to be interesting to see how that pans out for them.
I think it is a lot of obvious trust within the program, trust within the coaching, development. And so we'll see who replaces the offensive production with both running backs leaving and a key receiver. We'll see who replaces the edge of losing a linebacker and a stud defensive back, right? So let's talk about a couple of those guys. We talked about Sean. Expect him to not only be, as good as he was last year, but if not better. And then I'm looking at a defensive playmaker that could step up as well as Everett Dingle. So as far as, the Warriors are concerned, there are pieces in play to necessarily get them back into the playoffs.
100%, dude. I agree with that. And talking with him, I left that conversation with a lot of respect for their operation. And he said it, man, pretty much outright of they feel really confident in their ability to recruit these guys out of high school and develop them and turn them into all conference and real quality players at ESU. And they've been able to do that in the past. So switching gears over now to the other side of the Coal Bowl we talked about earlier. IUP, man. Let's talk about the Crimson Hawks. 7-3 a year ago, 3-3 inside of conference play. This is a team that's had its up and downs. And in very recent history, this has been a playoff contending type of team. The ceiling for this team is very high, but when you lose the starting quarterback in Karst Hunter, who was most of your offensive production a year ago, that's when some of the question marks start to pop up offensively for this squad. Now, who answer some of those questions, thankfully, for this IU team. J.D. Younger, the running back, he's 5'10", 194 pounds. He was a second-team All-PSAC West selection a year ago. Just under 500 yards, 7 touchdowns. He didn't hit big. I put that in my notes there on many long runs, but to me was a guy that was consistent for them. You need to see that change a year from now, though, going into this fall. This needs to be a guy that, instead of getting 4 or 5 yard games, needs to chunk this thing into a 23-yarder, a 30-yarder, or whatever that is down the field, needs to bust open some of those runs. IUP needs a guy to step up in the offensive backfield, which is where they're losing a lot of their talent in 25. On the other side of the ball, defensive back Noah Johnston, 6'2", 185. Got a lot of length, a lot of athleticism at that position, which is really important. 78 tackles and interception a year ago. Heavy presence in stopping the run. And one thing that stands out about Noah, he was first on the team in solo tackles with 43. You know that playing that position. Guys don't get past Noah. That's exactly what you look for in a backline defender, right?
Absolutely, right? When you think of a guy like Noah, you're thinking of a guy that's going to put his helmet to the football, right? He's going to go make a play. He's going to step up. He's going to fill the gap the best way he can, whether it's, playing the alley, being the alley defender, whether it's coming from the backside and making the play on the far side. So when you have a guy like that, there's absolutely – you have more of a sense of confidence when the defense steps foot on the field.
Can be hard to find some DBs that are willing to go and thump in the box there and fit like that, and he's definitely one of those guys. The position group to watch, though, for me is the quarterback room. I talked about Hunter leaving. You bring in transfer, Matthew Reevy, who comes from D2 Findlay, but started his career at Boston College, where he actually got a degree. He was second-team All-GMAC selection a year ago, 2,600 yards and 26 touchdowns. I'll be the first one to admit that Reevy flew under my radar. I did not know he was putting up this type of production at Findlay. Were you aware of this guy, obviously having some GMAC background?
To be honest with you, after last season, I would say no, only in the simple fact of, we went to the GLIAC and the only GMAC team we played was Hillsdale, right? But what I do know, based about having a teammate that had previously played at Findlay, is not only do they produce hard workers, but they produce smart football players.
Hell yeah. They absolutely do. The Oilers do it right down there, man. They got a hell of a squad. They've got an NFL pipeline too that has been really active. Very recently. Mike Jarrell is one of those guys, but that's going to be an interesting deal. Can Reevy step in and be that guy? All signs point towards absolutely yes. He's got some weapons on the outside, like Maurice Massey. And the only other quarterback that saw any snaps last year, redshirt freshman Zayd Etheridge. And that's a question of he's probably going to be in another backup role this year, especially with a guy like Reevy coming in to probably take over the reins at that position. But the last piece on this IUP team, Frank Signetti Jr., he returns to IUP as the offensive coordinator. He was an all-conference DB for the Hawks in his playing days, which is a really neat deal. He coached under his father at IUP recently. He was the offensive coordinator for 2 years while his father was the head coach. That's a really cool story in of itself. Most recently, though, was the offensive coordinator at Pitt, Drew. Now he has been a part of 15 different NFL staffs. He's got a wealth of coaching and football knowledge that should be a big difference maker for this IUP team. 15 different NFL teams coming from Pitt back to IUP, where he obviously has some family roots and tradition. That is a hell of a get for this squad.
Oh, absolutely. I think at the D2 level especially, you're kind of not necessarily, the word short on like NFL experience, right?
Yep.
Not saying that like people, couldn't necessarily follow their dreams and eventually get to that if they wanted to. But anytime that you do get a coach that was blessed to come from potential NFL backgrounds, that's awesome. For instance, when I was at Northwood, Coach Arnold Sr., which was current ST coordinator, Coach Arnold's father, coached the U, and just being able to pick his brain when he was coaching the U when they were winning national championships and being on NFL staffs after that, like it's a very cool experience. And I think these D2 kids, are absolutely in rare air, I would say.
Yep, 100%. Absolutely agree with that.
So as far as the next team is concerned, let's talk about the Bloomsburg Huskies. 6-5 a year ago, 4-3 in conference, which obviously that's kind of middle of the pack. When where I'm sure Kobe, we've talked about this with multiple teams, and I'm going to bring it up with pretty much any team that's 6-5, 4-3, because I've been a 6-5 team or a 5-6 team, whatever. You truly feel like you're 3 to 4 plays away from being.
Yeah, I wish I could say the same, to be honest with you, but I believe you.
Yeah, no, a little different. However, a huge factor that I think is going to help the Huskies is KJ Riley. He was not only their quarterback a season ago, but he was also their leading rusher, having that dual threat experience. So obviously trying to figure out where not only can you have your quarterback running the football, but also see about what about a running back getting some time, whether it's committee or a guy. But another factor on offense too that's going to be a really great return is your leading receiver in Jerry Griffin, who's going to be a guy for them as well. You're looking at defense, and we've talked about it with multiple teams as well. When you bring in a linebacker that is not only a guy that's a stud for you, but a linebacker that can be a leader, that's what Brady Thompson can be for this team. And so as far as the Huskies are concerned, like we've talked about, teams that are in the middle of the pack, you're a couple games, I'm sure you're a couple plays away from being 7-3 or 8-3, but you're a couple plays probably from maybe being 4-7. So bringing in 5 transfer guys as well, let's see what the Huskies can do for them next year.
3 of their first 4 games last year for this Bloomsburg squad, Drew, decided by a combined 8 points, if you can believe that.
Exactly what we were saying. You can be – what was their record within that again, Kobe, the first 3 games?
From last season, they were 6-5 and 4-3 in the conference.
Yes, and like we said, those 8 points right there is 3 wins or 0 wins. It could be next season. You know what I'm trying to say?
So they start 3-1. Their one loss was against a Seton Hill team that they gave them their only win in the conference. Seton Hill, that was their only victory. They won 15-14 over this Bloomsburg team. Now you talk about a team with some momentum. If you're 4-0 heading into this Kutztown game last year, I'm not going to say the result's going to be outright different. Kutztown kind of had their way with them, but that's a different moxie and a different attitude for a squad. You start 4-0 on the season.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah, absolutely, the way they carry themselves. So certainly look for them to not make that same mistake twice for this Bloomsburg squad. But we'll keep things going, and we'll talk about a team that it sounds like you at least had a little bit of familiarity with earlier on. Let's talk about Gannon and the Knights squad. And when you look at them, what jumps off the page immediately, you pick up a quarterback and a linebacker duo from D1 Maine who both saw snaps last year. They should both be guys that come in right away and make an impact. Anthony Harris, Tyshawn Stewart Crystal, respectively, at those 2 positions. The quarterback position does look pretty wide open heading into fall camp. I talked about Anthony Harris coming in, of course. You need to look at the wide receiver room. This is the kind of the point of emphasis here. Donnell Mason, he leads the way, 770 yards, 3 touchdowns a year ago. Who can step up and be in that wide receiver 2 spot, though? That's the point of emphasis for this room. You have a clear-cut number 1. Who can be the number 2 to take off some of the coverage, so to speak, some of the focus off of your number 1 guy? Because you know as well as I do, if you have one weapon, sometimes it's not enough. You need to have multiple guys out there to make sure the defense can't key in on specific targets. That could be Braden Sobolewski on the roster already, or it could be Chase Holmes coming in from D1 Dayton, that transfer coming in. They've got a couple guys who can compete for that wide receiver 2 spot type of deal. They also bring in Eric Rayburn as their offensive coordinator and O-line coach. He's coming from D2 UNC Pembroke, where he was the run game coordinator previously for the Braves. He played in the PSAC at Westchester, so another really cool deal there. But Gannon, 3-3 inside a conference last year. They didn't pick up any wins outside of that. They were 3-7. Really a down year for this Gannon squad. Looking to reload, bringing in some help from the D1 level. See if they can make it happen. New face of the OC spot.
Well, speaking of their coach being at Westchester, let's go right to Westchester with the Golden Rams. Similar story as Gannon, right? They went 4-3 in conference, but you go 0-3 to start, the non-conference play. So obviously you're going 4-6 overall. And if you're Westchester, that's not the type of season you want to have. So as far as some key returners, Jordan Cooper, when I read his stat lines and, was looking at the type of player he is, Kobe, 1,000 yards rushing for a quarterback, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions.
Cooper Jordan, by the way, flip it.
Yeah.
Yep.
My bad.
I do it all the time with the rosters because they do the last name first on the stats.
Mess me up. Rosters mess me up. Cooper Jordan.
You're good. You're good.
Bad. But yeah, you put Jordan on your back, you know what type of player you got to be, right? So
Yeah.
he's that guy, right? So
I love that.
let's see the type of let's see the type of season he has this upcoming season. And he will be missing his first 2 receivers. So expect Robbie Longo to potentially be that guy to step up as the, number 1 guy. And then here's a cool stint story. So linebacker Connor Noble, who had a fantastic season ago, per Athlink, he entered the portal, but per Athlink, he's registered with the Westchester Rams. So one of those.
So it looks like one of those cases where entered, decided to come back to institution.
He pulled a Bimba Tunkara. And so that's a huge response, right? You get your leader back on defense. You get a guy who's not only a playmaker but a game changer. Expect Westchester to really use that as a driving force on defense.
That's a big deal, and I think I go back to our conversation, or my conversation more particularly, with Tony Anise just very recently, right? And he talked about how, on paper they lost their entire offensive line to the portal, right? All 5 starters. Well, he told me on the show, he's like, hey, we got 2 of those guys back. Bob and Tim Anderson are back, playing for Ferris State in 2025. That happens at this level when guys go out, test the waters, and they maybe don't get the interest or the love that they thought they would get, or in those guys' case, I'm sure they picked up some offers from some Division 1s. They didn't want to leave Ferris State and the winning pedigree and what was happening over there. Glad to see that's happening at other squads.
How are they able to play? We graduated with that.
That is a great question that I was wondering the same thing.
Big fan of the Anderson twins. That blows my mind.
That's insane that those guys are still playing ball. We got guys older than us. Like, I just turned 24, and we got people older than us still playing ball at the college level.
Yeah, big fan of them, obviously. Played against them in high school. They're great players. That's crazy to me still.
That is ridiculous.
Let's talk
we'll keep
Kobe.
things going. We'll keep things going.
Kobe,
Edinboro, the Scots.
Yeah.
Yep. Edinboro. Let's talk about, for me, you talk about returners. It's nice when they announce some of the captains. That's an easy way for me to get some of the info. JT Taylor, Caden Spiegel, respectfully. Let's start with JT. He transferred in before last season from Notre Dame College, which is now unfortunately closed down at the D2 level. He made an impact right away. 30 tackles on the year, being named captain as a second-year transfer. I think that says a lot about a guy who came into this roster as a new, fresh face just a year ago. So that's a big deal. Caden Spiegel, the 6'2", 250-pound senior, he hasn't packed the stat book for the Scots. Obviously has made his impact on the roster. He's been named a captain. You don't just stumble into a role like that. And for me, what is important, 30-plus college games under his belt, Drew. This guy is a vet, and there's some things that you obviously can't just teach at the position. You need game experience for guys to get accustomed to this, playing at this speed. That won't be a problem for him. You bring in an all-conference wide receiver from D3 Western Connecticut State and Deshaun Allen, running back 1 and quarterback 1, the graduate, wide receiver 1, their best defensive player, both hit the portal. It's time for new faces to step up for this Scots team, and who better to lead them than Matt Scott over at Edinboro. So entering year 1 as the head coach of the Fighting Scots, that's a neat deal. They were 3-8 a year ago, 2-4 inside a conference play. We'll see if the Scots cannot improve on that conference record, Drew.
Yeah. As far as new coaches is concerned, there's a new head coach for the Lock Haven Eagles as Danton Mulrooney.
Mulrooney.
Yeah. Departed for FCS Brown. The Lock Haven Eagles, though, obviously, when you get a new head coach in there, first thing that's going to happen is guys are going to hit the portal. In this case, 25 people hit the portal.
Yeah.
Big number, right? We talked about it with, whether it's Westchester or whether it's Bloomsburg, right? 6-5, 4-6, right? Lock Haven, 5-6. You're 3-4 in conference. You're a couple of plays away from being, 6-5. 7-4, right? So, and then you get 25 players to hit the transfer portal. It's one of those where it's like, okay, now we got to kind of find a new identity almost. Not necessarily saying that it's going to be a bad identity or anything like that, but it's like 25 players at the portal. There were some good players in that mix. So it's like, all right, now who's going to step up? A couple guys that I'm looking at. When you have a linebacker that can be a stud, that's awesome. But when you have 2 linebackers that can be a stud, that's even better. Izzy Ramos as well as Rocco Daughtry. Expect both of them to be, forefronts for the defensive unit, right? Big-time playmakers for them. And then KJ Howard, the running back from them, leading rusher a year ago, I believe. Expect him to come in and not only, be the, driving force of the offense, but be someone that, this new staff can look at and be like, all right, this guy's right here. We're good.
Yeah, and his best friend under center, Jackson Ostrowski, for them, a quarterback who was a Harlan Hill nominee just a year ago, for very good reason. 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns through the air, and not a guy that's necessarily considered more of a dual threat type deal. I believe it looks like he finished last year with only 91 yards on the ground. This isn't a guy that's going to hurt you with his legs, but damn it, he's going to hurt you with his arm. And this is a guy that has been the focal point of this offense under Coach Mulrooney. In 1 year with Lockhaven, he's already made this kind of impact. Very interested to see what kind of jump he makes in year 2. You talk about volume at the quarterback position, 431 passing attempts a year ago. This is a guy that has been very, very dangerous for this Lockhaven attack. He is tied for second most passing yards and touchdowns for this Lockhaven team. So that is a neat deal. Jackson is certainly going to be a guy to make this offense go. Let's continue down the list. A team and a program that has had some pretty prominent quarterbacks come through it as of late. That being Shepherd, the Rams, a team that have gone, again, up and down and have been a playoff-type program in very recent history. Rob Ambrose comes in as the offensive coordinator for the Rams. Most recently was an analyst at D1 Maryland, now making the jump down to D2. He's known, though, Drew, for his 14-year head coaching stint at D1000. They had 3 trips to the national playoffs. This guy has a ton of experience across all levels of college football. He's going to be a big piece of this offense. Tyson Bagent, that's a name you should know if you're familiar at all with Division II football. The Shepherd product, who now is with the Chicago Bears, the prominent QB2 behind Caleb Williams up there. His brother is suiting up for the Rams now, Drew. A really cool story there. Ezra Bagent is a redshirt sophomore. He's going to compete with a few transfers for the starting job. The farting job.
Oh.
The starting job.
Whoa.
I don't think they have that at Shepherd.
I hope not.
He's competing for the starting job at Shepherd. Last year's starter, Lick Powell, transferred out. Looks like they've got some guys in the portal that'll come in. Ezra is certainly going to be a part of that conversation. Imagine being one of the other PSAC teams, looking at the scouting report and seeing Bagent again after you were terrorized for probably 3 or 4 years by one of the best quarterbacks in D2 football history.
Absolutely. I guarantee that they're calling mom and dad and being like, come on, anywhere else? Seriously. But that's really cool.
I don't mean to seem like this Shepherd team is not very, far removed from some really great seasons. They're 6-5 a year ago. This is a team that is still performing at a high level, but 3-4 inside of conference play for this Shepherd team, for Coach Cook and company. That's not acceptable. That the standards are much higher for the Rams, and I just know that from covering the program. And Malikia Brown led the team all-purpose yards over 1,000. This is a team that needs to have guys like that to come back and make this program rebound.
Absolutely. And speaking of a program that's trying to rebound based on last season, Shippensburg, they went 2-9 this season ago, 1-6 overall. Obviously, in today's day and age of college football, right? Like, the standard's the standard, and I'm assuming the coaches at Shippensburg are saying that, that's not the standard. That's not good enough, right? So key and interesting fact, though, is former Slippery Rock quarterback Braden Long recently transferred to the was named the Raiders head coach or quarterbacks coach. Whoa.
Thankfully, he didn't transfer. That would have been blockbuster. Yeah,
that would have been wild. Some real NIL to get that done. So the Raiders quarterback and receivers coach for the 2025 season. Current O-line coach Drew Gallardy was elevated to OC this past season, right? So then what are we thinking? All right, so you got a new coaching staff, and new OC, new quarterback coach, new receivers coach. All right, well, look, transfer receiver in, and that's exactly what they did. Transferred all-conference player from D2 Franklin Pierce, coming off a really good passing attack for him. They get him at receiver. The Raiders had 3 quarterbacks this season ago with 60 pass attempts, right? What do we do with that? You got to find some stability. You got to find a guy, right? There's a saying in football, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback, right? Like, that's the whole weird saying.
What about 3? What's the answer to 3?
I think it's maybe it's negative, So
Does that PEMDAS that shit out? I don't know
I
how
don't
that
know.
works.
I don't know. That Ohio State team had three quarterbacks that one year and ended up going to the Natty. So I guess
Yeah.
we'll see about it. Maybe Shippensburg's lucking out right here, and they just need to have three. But anyway, but it's gonna bring in some really good competition, right? And then you got Terrence Peterson Jr., who will be a key part of the defense. He was at the linebacker spot a season ago, started 10 games at outside linebacker, and was third on the team in tackles. So expect big things out of TPJ right there. And
I like that.
yeah, anytime there's a junior, you got to say it.
I like that. Moving over, Clarion, the Eagles, 3-8 a year ago, 1-5 inside of PSAC play. 13 reported transfers, lots of variety. This is what stands out to me off the top of my head looking at the list. 2 D3 running backs, a good playing experience. You got Tyreek Hall from Southern Virginia, Aaron Randolph from Bethany, and then they beef up the defensive line. Jerome Williams comes in from Allegheny, and William Hines from Walsh. 3 DBs and 3 wide receivers also in this incoming portal class, certainly areas they felt that they needed depth at over there at Clarion. Redshirt senior quarterback Anthony Garcia is back under center. He threw for 2,000 yards, also ran for almost 712 touchdowns. He's 5'11", 210 pounds. Dude is a unit. He can get it done with his legs and through the air. On the other side of the ball, you got to watch for Griffin Buzzell, 90 tackles a year ago, 2 sacks, 4.5 TFLs, interception. A dude that does it in all phases of the defense. He's back for this Eagles team. And then Larry Wilson comes in from IUP to take on the same role with the Eagles. He's the offensive coordinator. He helped the Crimson Hawks to top 5 standings in most offensive statistical categories in his time there in terms of PSAC standings. So really, for me, the direction is trending upwards for this Clarion squad. Again, 1-5 in conference a year ago. Expect that number to be better in 2025.
Absolutely. When you said originally 5'11", 205, I was like, oh, that's not big. And I was like, wait, no, he said 5. That's a big boy right there.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely make some plays with his legs too. Let's talk about the Millersville Marauders.
You always, dude. You had Mary last week too, and I put this on here purposely. I wanted you to say it. The Marauders, yes, sir.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about some 2 players that not only are going to be leaders, but also playmakers, returning captains, actually. Cam Taylor, receiver, 208, 6'3", big body, right? Played in 21 games last 2 seasons. Hasn't had his true breakout season yet, but, when this team's going to build, right? 1-10, I was on a team that went 1-10, right? You're only going to go up from there. You're going to expect him to be one of those key, building blocks to get going. And then Chris Pierce, linebacker, 6'2", 210, similar story. He had not necessarily a starting role or anything like that, but definitely a guy that earned, some respect out of his teammates to get captain, and expect big things and, expect him to be a building block for the defensive side of the ball after transferring from Delaware a year ago. However, there are some new faces in the building, both at the OC and the DC spots. Offensive coordinator Brian Ferguson was previously the D2 head coach at Concord, while this will be Clark's second stint as the DC for Millersville. I'm not even going to try to say Marauders, without Millersville with it. So, new faces in some new places right there for Millersville. So, expect, obviously when you go 1-10 and you go 0-7 in conference, it's all about getting that first one, right? It's all about getting that first one in conference. It's all about getting that, that first win in non-conference, right? And then building off that.
Yep. 100%. Let's close this thing out, man. Seton Hill, the Griffons, 3-8 a year ago, 1-5 inside of conference play. The previous head coach, Dan Day, he steps down from his role in June. Kevin May, previously defensive coordinator, promoted internally, to take his place. So not exactly a new voice inside of that program. Day, though, to go back to him, the all-time winningest coach in Seton Hill history. The program did only start in 2005. I did not know that. It's really a younger football program in the grand scheme of things. He was a part of that 2005 team. He was recruited and played in the inaugural team for this Seton Hill squad. So definitely a passing of the torch here as Coach Day steps down. Coach May, on the other hand, he's been on the staff for 6 years already. Certainly, like I said, not a new voice inside of this facility, in this building. These guys are familiar with the way he operates and goes about his business. QB1, RB1 are gone. Offensive backfield, A lot of question marks right now. A lot of things to be determined going into fall camp. Richie McCormick from Arizona, linebacker that will draw a lot of attention defensively for this squad. And the 6'1", 240-pound, plays sideline to sideline, 92 tackles a year ago, 10 TFLs, 2 sacks, interception. That was good enough to be named first team all PSAC for him. That to me is the focal point for this defense and really for this team. How do they build around that? How do they improve on the 3-win mark from a year ago, Drew? And that kind of closes out the PSAC conversation.